All right, good day, everyone. We have about a minute before we get started. We will begin with a few introductions, but while we're waiting for the next 60 seconds, I do welcome people to type in the chat, introduce yourself, and share where you are joining us from. Feel free to put your country. We have people from all around the world joining us today. Welcome to everyone. The vast majority are probably teachers, but you may do something else. We're glad to have you wherever you are from, whatever you do. And we'll get started in just a brief moment. Okay, excellent. So as you're all introducing yourselves, I'll go ahead and get us started. My name is Rebecca Vieira. I am the Associate Director of Global Initiatives for PhET Interactive Simulations, a project of the University of Colorado. I am speaking to you today from Washington, D.C., and I'm really excited about today's presentation, which is actually a joint presentation by both PhET and then also LabXchange. Today, we'll take a look at interactive personalized learning and how you can use these two resources together to really enhance your teaching. So let's just go ahead and do quick introductions. I'm going to first hand it over to Zach, and then we'll hand over to the LabXchange team in the order of presentations before we get started. Zach, go ahead.
Thank you, Rebecca. My name is Zach Mbasu. I am joining you from Nairobi, Kenya. I am the African PhET ambassador. I champion the use of PhET simulations on the continent. And I am really excited to be here to share about PhET simulations and LabXchange and also learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Jenny?
Hello, my name is Jenny Frank. I am on the LabXchange team, and I am the head of Educator Engagement and Programming. And I'm joining you here today from Hamburg, New York, or more closely, Buffalo seems to be a little bit more common. And I'm just so incredibly excited to share this collaboration, support PhET, and to show you today how our platforms can work together to enhance learning and, address some of those educator challenges that we know you're all facing over there or out there. I'm going to turn it over to Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Lou. I'm coming to you from the greater Boston area in Massachusetts. And I'm a high school teacher. I teach a variety of biology things from intro-level bio to AP biology and other electives like biotechnology. And I'm here to share about how I've adapted the PhET simulations and LabXchange and melded them together for the perfect delivery tool. I'm going to pass it on to Andrew so he can introduce himself too.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew. I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa. So I see we have a few South Africans joining us today. Great to have everybody with us. I'm on the growth team with Jenny at LabXchange, and just very excited to be here today to help present this with PhET and see what sort of questions we have from the audience. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'm really excited to see we have people from all over the world, Asia, Africa, some folks in Europe. Of course, it looks like we've got a lot of folks from the United States as well. So yeah, feel free to continue introducing yourselves. I should also say this collaboration that we've had over the past few months, or maybe a bit longer now, is thanks to the Amgen Foundation. We're very excited to have them supporting our work together. There's a few kind of objectives that we've laid out for this about 60-minute session. As I mentioned in the chat to those who are asking a bit, we will take a look briefly at what PhET interactive simulations are, because we know some of you may have come to this webinar from the LabXchange network. And then we'll also take some time for LabXchange to explain, well, exactly what their platform is, because those of us, those who might have come from the PhET network may not yet know about LabXchange, and we hope that you learn a lot. And then we'll take a look at, again, how these two things integrate. As we continue, we'll be taking turns presenting these different pieces, and there's a couple different ways for you to engage. We will ask you sometimes to contribute in the chat. You also, there may be moments where we'll say, if you'd like to raise a digital hand, we can let you turn on your audio so that you can ask your question. There's also a Q&A button in the menu. I think it's at the bottom for you. And that would be a good place to put your questions for the presenters so that they don't get lost in the chat. Otherwise, I think those of us who are not presenting at the moment will also be keeping our eyes on the chat to see if we can answer quick questions that pop up. But if you do have something that would need a little bit more explanation or in-depth conversation, then make sure you put that in the Q&A box. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just launch us off very briefly about what PhET is before I hand it over to my colleague Zach. So PhET interactive simulations, originally the term PhET meant physics education technology. What we do is that we create virtual laboratory spaces initially started with physics and then chemistry, mathematics, biology, earth and space science. But really it started over 20 years ago. Dr. Carl Wyman is a Nobel Prize winning physicist. He was at the University of Colorado Boulder at the time. And he was at the peak of his physics research career. When he realized the importance of helping, let's say, the everyday person understand science, particularly as he was going around trying to explain what in the world he won the Nobel Prize in physics for. And so he ended up launching on this kind of different path, looking at the psychology of learning, the psychology of teaching, and saw the power of these interactive simulations. So Zach will go into a bit more detail, but like you see in the image here, an interactive simulation, it's a scenario where students or learners can interact, change things like you might do in real life with digital, like with equipment, but in a digital space. So they're not videos, they're not just games. They can be used by teachers in many different ways. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Zach.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I would like us to try out one specific simulation. It's called natural selection. And I would let Rebecca to drop the link to the simulation in the chat box. So I'm not going to tell you a lot about the simulation itself, but I'll give you an opportunity to play with the simulation for about 3 minutes. And as you're playing with the simulation, I would like you to think about 2 questions. The first question that I would like you to think about is, what do you notice about that simulation? And the second question is, what do you wonder about that simulation? So Rebecca has dropped the simulation in the chat box, and the name of the simulation is natural selection. You're going to select the intro window, have access to the simulation, play around with the simulation, and think about those 2 questions. What are you noticing when you play around with that simulation? And then 2, what do you wonder about that simulation? So I'll give you the next 3 minutes to play around with the simulation, and you can give your feedback in the chat box or raise your hand up, and then we can get your feedback from you.
I'll just go ahead and let it run a little bit here in the meanwhile, but we do hope that folks try this out on their own as well in their own window.
So play with the simulation, and as you play with the simulation, think about these 2 questions. What do you notice about the simulation? And the second question is, what do you wonder? And if you have ideas, please drop them in the chat box. Great, I can see in the chat box, a few people have already started to drop some responses. Christine Lucas says, I use this simulation every year. I love it. Amma says, amazing. Great. We can have more feedback in the chat box. Also, feel free to raise up your hand and verbalize. Fatima, Abraham, I see your hand is up. Do you want to share maybe something that you notice with the simulation, or something that you're wondering about the simulation?
I think we have to allow them to speak, Zach. So if you see a hand raised, go ahead and just click allow to speak.
Okay, great. Lucian says, very good, you can separate single variables of the system. Jenny says, I love how learners can get a chance to use curiosity to begin to understand concepts. Alison says, I got the bunnies take over the world. Wow. Scott says, wolves are important. And there's a lot more response in the chat about the simulation. Some of them about Ebuka says it talks about natural selection and striking balance between striking balance in nature through predation. So what I just did is what we refer to as open play. So I simply did not tell you about the simulation. I allowed you to explore the principles of natural selection in a very simple and interactive way for about 3 minutes. And there is amazing feedback within the chat box about the simulation itself. So why is this open play important? So one, open play is important because it allows the learners to actively engage with the simulation. They try out the features of the simulation, you try out the buttons, you change the variables, and you see the effects, just like you've been doing. Secondly, open play also encourages learners to ask their own questions and seek their own answers. And this promotes a sense of security, as someone in the chat box mentioned. And lastly, open play allows each student to interact with the simulation in their own way and at their own pace. So, sorry, let me just share my screen. So when I gave you a chance to play with the simulation, each one of you has been playing around with the simulation in your own way and discovering your own things as you play through the simulation. So we really encourage that when you use the PhET simulations, you allow the learners to play freely with the simulation for a few minutes before diving into the lesson itself. So the goal of PhET is to make learning STEM more like doing STEM. So by exploring the simulation and manipulating the simulations, students gain a more conceptual understanding of the concepts. And also the simulations allows for fostering scientific inquiry. So the learners can change variables. For example, in the simulation you just played, you've increased, for example, you added a mate, maybe you brought in a wolf, for example, and also you could make predictions of what could happen if, like, the number of bunnies, for example, increased to high numbers. The simulations are also accessible to everyone, regardless of their background and resources. These simulations are freely available. You can access them anywhere. We have them translated in a number of languages to ensure that they can be used widely. And lastly, these simulations are also designed to be highly interactive. They encourage exploration, and also learners can manipulate to see the changes of the effect. And what this does is that it gives the learners the freedom to explore, the freedom to experiment, and also the freedom to learn at their own pace. So we have more than 160 simulations on the website. As I've mentioned, they are free to students, to teachers. They are open educational resources. And for you to make the most out of these simulations, you should consider maybe creating a free account on the PhET website so that you can also access some of the other resources that exist on the PhET website. So I'm just going to take you through the PhET website quickly so that you just know where you can get which resources on the PhET website. Let me share my screen again, share screen and take you directly to the website. Okay, so what you're seeing is the PhET website. And when you come to this PhET website, let me just go to the homepage of the PhET website so that you know how to access these simulations from the beginning. So this is the PhET website. And this PhET website has got these simulations in physics, in chemistry, in math, and in biology. We have over 160 simulations. They have been translated into 114. Now we have 116 languages, including native languages in Africa. And also we have teacher-submitted activities where you can go to as an educator, you get an inspiration. You can also adapt some of those teacher lessons to your own context as well. And majority of teachers, for example, on the continent in Africa, they really struggle with internet accessibility. So we also have the offline access here. When you go there, you can go directly to an app that gets all the simulations from the website, and then you can be able to use those simulations offline. Now, in order to access the simulations, when you come to this tab, you'll be able to have a list of all the simulations. You can choose how you view these simulations. For example, you can decide to select simulations depending on how new they are, or you can also filter them according to alphabetical order and select the simulations. On the right-hand side, you can filter simulations by subject. For example, if you want physics simulations, you can filter physics, you can filter chemistry simulations, you can also filter math simulations, and you can also filter these simulations by grade level. So we have simulations that are cutting across the different academic levels, all the way from elementary to university level. We are also working very hard to make sure that we have simulations in a technology that allows accessibility on tablets and mobile phones and the computer. So we are converting all our simulations to HTML5. And then we also recognize learners with special needs. So we are also developing special inclusive features and accessibility features like alternative input and also zooming and panning, just to allow our learners with special needs to also have access to these simulations. We have also other resources on the PhET website. For example, tips for using PhET, you can get them here. You can browse activities that have been developed by other teachers. You get inspiration from this part. And then we also have virtual workshops where you can get more insights on how to use these simulations in teaching and learning. If you're interested in research, also you can come to this tab, and there is a large amount of resources and research that has been done by PhET itself and also by other people apart from PhET on how PhET is being used in classroom, and also features that just make PhET simulations accessible. So I'll stop sharing my screen and just encourage you to explore that website and go back to my my slides. Share screen. Okay, great.
Want me to get it for you, Zach? I've got mine up.
It's up now. Okay, great. So you've had an experience, maybe some of you have already had an experience of interacting with the simulations before, or some of you have had the experience of just interacting with the simulations for the first time. And the PhET simulations has got a number of benefits. I'll just mention maybe one or two of them. So one of them, the PhET simulations are like very interactive, and they allow students to change the variables, see the effects in real time. And this active learning, it helps in better retention and understanding of concepts. The other benefit is that because they are game-like environments, the simulations make learning more fun and engaging for the students. And this increases the motivation for the students to engage in this subject and to learn in the STEM subjects as they go through the concepts themselves. Now, based on extensive research, these simulations are also designed to promote active learning. They're designed to promote inquiry-based approach to learning. And this has been proven to lead to deeper understanding and also improved retention of knowledge as they interact and learn through these PhET simulations. Also, this based on evidence, the simulations have been known to try and change the norms within the classroom. So for example, in embedding the PhET simulations into the classroom has helped teachers to move away from the usual traditional classroom, where learning is based on the authority of the teacher and just remembering, that is, remembering what the teacher said, to more constructivist approach to learning, where the learners are discovering things, they're coming up with their own ideas and sharing, which really brings engagement in the classroom. PhET also, the simulations are very flexible. They can be used in pre-lab activities. They can also be used in environments where you only have a projector and a computer, and then you have a large class size behind you. And so you can project it and lead like beautiful discussions. They can also be used in laboratories and also in distance learning as well. So these simulations can also be used in a variety of ways. For example, I've seen a math teacher use a chemistry simulation to try and teach integers. So their teachers are usually very creative in how they use these simulations in a classroom setup. So what I would like to encourage you is to explore the simulations on your own, and then try to think about, like, what are some of the simulations that you can be able to use in your lessons, maybe this term or this semester, to support conceptual understanding of lessons, of lessons and ideas. So I'd like to maybe return this to Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Zach. So now you've got a very brief overview of what PhET simulations are. And so at this time, we're going to hand it over to the LabXchange team, who's going to share with us a bit about how PhET simulations are among a wide variety of very high quality resources that can be integrated together, because at PhET, we know we are just one piece of the puzzle, and that, good teaching is about bringing many different resources together, tying them into a meaningful storyline. And so that's what our collaboration has been about. So thank you so much, Zach. I'm going to hand it over to Jenny.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thank you so much, Zach. We are so incredibly excited today to share with you a little bit about LabXchange. So LabXchange is a global science classroom open to every curious mind. It was created at Harvard University with the support from Amgen Foundation, as Rebecca said earlier. And this platform enables you to access high quality science education and also connect learning to careers and give everyone everywhere, no matter what the circumstance, the opportunity to chart a path in science. All of it for free. Just like PhET, LabXchange is also free, and we will always be free because of that generous Amgen Foundation support. Through collaboration, personalization, and contextualization, LabXchange also offers an integrated teaching and learning ecosystem in which tomorrow's thought leaders can build knowledge, contribute unique perspectives, and engage with a diverse global community to develop a sense of belonging, specifically a belonging in science. At LabXchange, we also understand that teachers are facing great challenges in today's classroom, challenges such as lack of time and resources, opportunities to collaborate with others in the field, adapting to remote learning platforms, as well as addressing to the numerous individual needs of students with diverse learning abilities and backgrounds. So how can LabXchange help? Well, we have a pretty incredible dashboard, a set of incredible tools, and a great, amazing library where you can access over 21,000 different science resources. I'll be honest with you, the moment I say 21,000+ resources, that number continues to change, because at LabXchange, we are always looking for high quality content to put in our library. And that's one of the wonderful ways that we have found and partnered with PhET, who is an innovator in creating amazing, highly interactive simulations around the sciences. So let's talk a little bit more about how we've gotten to 21,000 high quality vetted science resources on our platform. Well, we do this through not a competitor model, but a collaborator model. And so we source content, and right now we have over 150 credible collaborators. We're sourcing content from other organizations that are innovators in science that have the same beliefs as we do, giving science access to everyone who needs it for free. So that is an incredible feat that we have done, and we continue to grow. So think about us as your one-stop shop. Instead of visiting and searching through multiple websites, looking for things that maybe not be the highest of quality, save some time, visit LabXchange, check out our library, and use our robust features to find all the content that you're looking for. And again, in one place. So Andrew, if you wouldn't mind, could you place in the chat a link to our library? And I'm just going to walk you through really quickly how we've gotten there. So this right here is access to our collaborator page along with Amgen and UNESCO. We collaborate with a ton of content providers, and you might recognize some really big names. I know BioBuilders is a huge name. The California Academy of Sciences, we've been recently collaborating with. And you'll see HHMI, Harvard has a ton of content. We also, of course, have Khan Academy content on our website. They're just one of our collaborators. And as I've told you, we also have PhET. And this is just an example of our collaborator dashboard. Every collaborator that we feature on our website has their own dashboard. And you can see that we already have 322 pieces of content. And what we are doing is not only supporting the English version of the PhET simulations, but we are also supporting some of the translated versions in different languages. Again, very easy to access. Simply click and there you go. You have access in another space and place. And look how easy it is to share. Simply click on the share link. You can share it to Google Classroom. We know that is a really well-adopted learning management system. But my favorite, just copy the link and you can share it in any learning management system or any way that you see fit. So our library is extensive. We have a ton of different content types ranging from videos, text, images, questions. We have narratives covering so many different stories about people in education, people in the sciences, I should say, and how they've gotten to that space and time in as scientists, learning about the challenges that they have maybe faced and overcome. And what better way to ignite passion and curiosity about the sciences when learners can see people just like them with similar challenges and backgrounds and stories becoming successful in the field of science. That's just one of the content pieces that we're really excited about. But more so, we're really excited about the idea of simulations. And we know that PhET does simulations really, really well. One of the ways that we have been working to help support the field of science through simulations is to find that little gap, right? The biology, the life science-based simulations, as well as biotechnology. If we're going to talk about STEM careers and being forward future thinking, then that was a space that we knew our team at LabXchange could excel at. And so again, not in a competitive way, but in a collaborative way, we too have provided some simulations. We've created them with our team, and our simulations are, again, life science, biology-based, biotechnology-centered. What makes our simulations pretty incredible is that our simulations are actually more like a virtual lab experience. I know that so many educators around the world have such limited access to resources and to different kinds of materials that you might need in order to do one of these sophisticated labs in the classroom, hands-on, face-to-face. And so what we're trying to do is provide all the same access to these incredible opportunities, but in a virtual space using our lab simulations. So just very quickly, I'm running through the context of a gel electrophoresis lab. Again, an equipment piece that for me in my classroom, I would never have been able to share with all of my learners. There are so many cool and interactive features. Students have an ability, just like scientists, to make predictions. This example of gel electrophoresis is asking them to predict which of the gel dyes will move, and they can move the interactive as part of their prediction. The protocol is the actual lab simulation, and this just gets me so excited. You know, imagine having access to your own virtual laboratory space where learners can move things around, explore, just like you would in a real hands-on laboratory. Then, when they're ready to conduct the protocol, the lab experience, there are so many features here to help guide them through. Once they have completed one of the items, so for instance, place the agarose gel in the electrophoresis box, that item is selected, and then they click through. There's opportunities to restart the step, because isn't that what learning's all about? It's about making mistakes and having an opportunity to learn from it. At the end, as learners go through the entire simulation, they can look at their results, compare them from their prediction to the actual results and ideal results, just like you would in a real science laboratory. And then lastly, reflect on what they've learned and how this information can be shared in a real world application or some just great takeaways for best practices in a science laboratory experience. Again, one of my favorite parts about what we do here at LabXchange and how, you know, we're working to make sure that every learner, every place has an opportunity to access science in a very authentic and a very realistic way. Now, I've talked a lot about simulations and interactives, but we have so much other content available. As a teacher, I'm always looking for something to really make my instruction dynamic and powerful. And we have such a great collection of videos that are inspiring and spark student curiosity. But we also have case studies, which are really fantastic to start to learn and be exposed to really important conversations around climate, around conservation, biodiversity are just a few that come to my head. My favorite, though, and the one I think that's going to really resonate with all of you today, is the idea of the learning pathway. And that's something that we have created, a tool for educators to use, able to give context to a simulation. And we think that this is a perfect partnership with PhET. So oftentimes as an educator, when I'm using a simulation like those 160 provided by PhET, my job is to introduce, right? To engage or to hook the learner into that learning experience, as well as help to bridge and build that foundational background and knowledge so that I can ensure that every learner is going to have the best opportunity for success when they are interacting with the simulation. But how do you do that in a thoughtful way? Well, we like to use the pathway. And a pathway is basically a tool that we have at LabXchange that gives you a structured learning experience. It supports that engagement. It helps further concept development and application. It gives you opportunity for embedding assessment, maybe a check for understanding or a summative assessment, and any opportunity to extend the learning, again, with those narratives I talked to you about, or just maybe other types of content to extend that curiosity and engagement. So let me show you an example of a pathway. And this pathway, as a matter of fact, uses a PhET simulation. So again, a pathway is a structured learning experience. As you can see here, each of the content pieces is sequenced in a way for the learner to work through the learning experience. Just like a story, a lesson is a story, right? It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. So as a learner, they're going to start their experience, and hold on here, I'm going to start it back at the beginning with the first type of resource. In this case, we've got this really cool interactive where they get to explore how the tongue works to perceive different taste sensations. In this interactive, this is an example of a scrollable, but as you can see here, I know the students in my classroom would find this really interesting and a great way, a great hook to engage them and remind them about different kinds of taste receptors and so forth. Next, perhaps as an educator, you want to just kind of see, you know, as an audience, who finds broccoli bitter? Who finds carrots bitter? Who finds dark chocolate bitter? And what a great way to engage an entire class talking about differences, right, in the taste buds and way that you interpret and perceive different tastes. What a great way to start to hook students into talking about more scientific concepts like phenotypes and genotypes, and lead them in to that more abstract and thoughtful science constructs. Again, another interactive to start to talk to them about genes and to start to talk to them about how their experiences are affected by the environment, our phenotypes, but also our genetics. And then students move down through a text, again, to build academic vocabulary. Each one of these texts linking to another opportunity to investigate, to, you know, go and be curious about what these different things mean. And then move on to that another text that talks a little bit about it. And then here we go, then to move on to that PhET simulation. Imagine how much more powerful this simulation will be to learners now that we've ensured that they are engaged in the topic, that they have some really good foundational knowledge about important concepts that will be reviewed and explored and experimented with using this simulation. And I just feel like students will have such a greater success rate. And this is just an example of how the LabXchange pathway, we have many of public ones, and we also have ones that you can create yourself. You can customize, you can tailor it, you can contextualize it to your learners, to your region, to the things that are important in your classroom community, all with this simple tool called a pathway. Well, the other thing I wanted to share just very quickly before I turn it over to Mary, who's going to talk to you about a specific pathway that she created with her colleagues at PhET, is a few of the tools that I think if I were an educator today, this would be the first thing I would do after today's meeting. And number one would be to sign up for an educator account. It is a free account. Everything, as I've said before, at LabXchange, at PhET is free. It will always be free. That is part of our belief system. Everyone should have access to high quality science education. But the reason why I'm telling you to sign up for an educator account is that you're going to have access to a personal dashboard. I will tell you firsthand that when you go to a library that has 21,000 plus resources, you will certainly find what you are looking for. And oftentimes it's difficult to organize those things. And look at this, a dashboard, all you need to do is press on the star button that you want to save that to your dashboard. And now every time you return, all of your favorite content is right there at your fingertips, ready to be used. And I also need to mention that not only can you add our LabXchange, our PhET content to your dashboard, but you can add your own content. Upload your favorite videos that you've created. Upload that slide deck that you always use as part of that lesson. Upload a worksheet, a PDF, a Word document, whatever it is. What are those things that you're always looking for to access when you're trying to promote hybrid learning in your classroom? The LabXchange dashboard is a great place to organize it and access it. And again, be that one-stop shop. Lastly, we've also got some customization and creation tools. All of these are accessible for an educator account. Look at all the great things that you can make to personalize that learning experience for the students in your classroom. Because at the end of the day, you're the expert. You know what is best for your learners. You know what your expertise is and how online learning is not just going to support your teaching and learning, but help make it shine, help make it memorable and impactful. You can create question sets. You can add audio. I love the idea of adding podcasts for students to listen to as they ride home on the bus. I worked in a rural school setting and many of my students had over an hour bus ride. And so having an opportunity to listen to learning about science was a great thing that I used to do in my classroom. Create your own case study, add a document, an image, a text. And most importantly, here's that feature, the pathway feature. I encourage you today to try it out. Take your favorite content, create your own learning story for your students. And just like I showed you earlier, simply share the link, write to them. Any learning management system or communication strategy that you use, it works perfectly. So last but not least, I am going to turn it over to Mary and her experience using PhET simulations and creating a virtual pathway for her learners in the classroom. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okie dokie. Hi, everyone. Let me share two of my most favorite things blended together as soon as I get my screen shared. Okay. This is a pathway I made because I use the PhET simulations in my class all the time. And I love LabXchange because it has so many resources I can bring together and tell the story that I want for my students. I do find, depending on my level and who I have in the room that day, my students need context. They need reminders about where we are in the sequence of learning. They need reminders on what points to be looking for or how to wrap things up, maybe vocabulary we were working on before. So one of the best parts of using a LabXchange pathway is I can bring all those things together in a sequence that's useful for me. So we made this pathway available for everyone. So if you go to the library, you can search for it. I made it a question. So it's how do environmental factors affect population? So if you use that, you can search for it that way. You can filter by content type to look for a pathway. And it will appear, I guess I should use environmental factors right there. If you click on it, you can see it exists as it is. And I have a few things that are a component of this. I have some background to remind my students. I would give this kind of as a self-directed pathway at first. They might complete the first one on their own, open it, kind of read it as a review, or maybe as a bell ringer as students come in. And then the next parts we would do together in groups. So here's a document that I would have them use as a way to record their thinking. Because as they go through any virtual experience, I want them to kind of keep track of what they're doing, write down any questions and make notes so that we can talk about it later. And then it links directly to the simulation. And if you click on this simulation, one of the great things about PhET is they have so many options. You can really personalize the simulations as they exist. You go to the PhET webpage, you can see and sign up for your teacher account. You can see kind of how to customize those. So I did that. I customized my URL and I embedded it here into my LabXchange pathway because I want my students to pay attention to a very specific part of the simulation, kind of explore one aspect of it. So if you were exploring it earlier with Zach, you might have noticed there was a lab part and an introduction part, and there were a whole bunch of other buttons. This URL kind of hides those so my students can be a little more focused and they can play around in the same kind of way, more open-ended to start and see what all the features allow them to complete. And then part two, this might be a place where I interject. So we're completing this pathway, maybe hybrid, and here would be where we have a class discussion and come back to this, maybe do a little more guided exploration. I'm having them play with specific features and make observations. And then again, the simulation's linked so they can follow along. They don't have to find the link or go to a bunch of places like a one-stop shop. And then this is another place where I built in some support for students. So maybe this is a good chance to talk about natural selection and how they might see it playing out. Because part three, we explore a little deeper and they have to use the simulation to support a particular claim. So they are using the simulation to help collect evidence and then explaining their reasoning. And here I provided 3 different prompts so I can have my students either explore different aspects and maybe come back and discuss, or maybe I'll use one depending on the level of my student and have them build on other ones later. And then at the end, we do have a little sort of summary or extension piece. And this is just one version of this. So if you find this on the LabXchange library and you want to customize it, because I know we've talked a lot about pathways here, you click these 3 little dots. Let me just throw this pathway in the chat just in case. Here's the pathway. If you click the 3 little dots, it does give you the option to clone. So what cloning does when you click this is it will make your own copy. Now to do that, you do need to make one of those Educator accounts. The customization piece is something that you do need to be logged in for because it saves it to your dashboard. And you can see here now I have the options. I can like remove things, I can add things, I can add notes. So like this little note here with my face is a note that only my students see. So if you wanted to take things out or add things in, you can add things that already exist on the library. So if you already had your favorite evolution video or something you wanted to add in, you can just hit the plus, it adds it right there. If you wanted to add something from your own content, if you upload things to the dashboard, you would find them here. Or if you do this plus add new content, it'll ask you to upload it right now. So if I click, I want to add a document, it'll ask me like, where on your computer is that document? So you have all those options. You can make it as long or as short as you want. You can customize it for your particular audience. You can change the learning objectives if that suits your need. And then this will appear now in your own dashboard as however you've created it. So now you can see it's private. This is like my little mini version, and I can share this link again, or I can share it back out. But we didn't just create a pathway. We thought maybe other people would like to see some other options. So I also created this teacher guide. So if you look in the library, you can find it here. And what the teacher guide does is basically walks through kind of, if you missed this webinar and you found this pathway, how might you use it in your class? So it gives you a little bit of background, like what I was thinking, what kind of audience did I intend to use it for? What are the strategies I was thinking about as I implement this in a hybrid way? And then it links directly to all the documents I was using, to the pathway itself. So if you wanted to share this out with students, kind of like a one-stop memory shop, so that you know, okay, here are all the things I just heard about. And the links directly, if you click on all these, they'll open in a new tab. And as I was thinking, I was like, oh, maybe for this section, they might need this. So I also included in this digital support section some other suggestions, like, oh, maybe I would start with this peppered moth for my intro class, because they like to see like a concrete example. So maybe that simulation would be something I add into the pathway for them. Or maybe this heredity one, I might remind them about some genetics pieces if I wanted to focus on the allele aspect of the PhET simulation. So I linked to those here in the teacher guide as well, to provide some extra options. And this is just another way, if it helps you to kind of think through the lesson as a teacher, this teaching guide kind of supports that. But the pathway I was showing you initially is intended to be more of that like student facing piece. So this just has the links that they need to go through to experience the lesson. I did want to show you one more thing. I know I see some things in the chat about like, well, how do you do this with your class? Can it be integrated into an LMS? One of the pieces is, again, the share button, because this is in the public library. You can share it to Google Classroom. You can just copy the link. If you wanted to share your personal version, that clone version that I added things to, whoops, like this, you would have to share the link directly. But there is one more feature. I know Jenny was showing you the very cool dashboard. If I go back to the dashboard, this is where you would like add new content if you wanted to share it that way. Oh, you can see my little private pathways. But they also have a classes feature here. And I use this with my students, so they log in once and I can kind of see what I'm doing, or see what they're doing. And here's my class. Basically, you share this class code and they log in. It is private, so you have to admit students into the class. So if you look at learners, you can see like I've only admitted a few people. They have this like approve button, so like random strangers aren't in your class. And then what they see on the class side is like all of the content. So every piece of content you want students to see, hang out on this list. And then anything you have like waiting in the wings, you can leave down here in this unposted section. And then students can go through and complete it. What you see from the teacher side, if you go to this progress button, is you can see if they've interacted with it or not. If they've started it, if they've gone through parts of it, they'll show you how much. And if there are any questions, like assessment questions built in, they'll show you about how many they got correct. So it's kind of nice. It's just a check-in on them. It doesn't like show me like which parts did they read, but it does show me like, oh, they've interacted it. We're ready to have a conversation on the next piece. So it's a nice check-in for everybody. If I do want to message individual learners, because I don't know about you, but often kids are absent for one reason or another. And if they've missed a lab experience, like I need to help check in with them. So often I'll send them the LabXchange simulations to help catch up on things that they've missed, and they can go through the lab kind of at their own pace. Teachers can also be learners. We use this as a professional development option as well, like using our class setting to share content that way. But you can send learners individual pieces of content. So this assign button lets you, if you want to privately assign some students some extra things, you can do that, and then it shows up for them only and not for everybody. You can also message them, or if you want to see an individual student's progress, if you just like, oh, I just want to see how one student's doing, it shows you their little list. There is also a discussion feature. So if you wanted to use this, I personally use my my school's learning management system as well, but it is here. And it's an option to have students like not leave one space. You can have them post messages and use it like a thread. This is a private class. So all in all, like, I love using PhET simulations. I love using this personalized pathway option so that my students get the support they need and kind of go in one place. I can add in a bunch of things and they can use it self-directed, or we can interrupt it and kind of have conversations around the things they're exploring in those simulations. And I can personalize it to make it what I need it to be for my class. I'm going to pause here because I know I've said a whole bunch of things and shown you all kinds of pages, just to double check to make sure if there are any questions that we missed along the way.
Thank you, Mary.
Sure.
There's still a number of questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you want to address any of those verbally.
Okay.
You may have already answered some of them.
Okay, let's see. From my Google Classroom class, you can link to the Google Classroom class to your LabXchange. Like, this link is the personal link for your particular class that you started, so you can always add that in. I'm not sure what the D2L LMS platform is, so I will let Andrew or Jenny answer that one. I'm not sure about that. Sorry, Kayla. I know because all of our resources are free and intended to be free, we're not including them as parts of paid packages or anything. I don't know what the question from Amina is referencing, but it is completely free to everybody. Everything in the library doesn't require a login. You can share this link with anyone. So the teaching guide I showed you today, those PhET simulations, again, if you want to find them, you go content type, you can search by simulation, you can look for PhET or LabXchange or whoever you're interested in finding. And you can even sort by language. So if you are looking to embed or maybe switch out for some of your learners a different language, you can use those options here to find them. And kind of make it what you want it to be. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, it looks like all of the questions that at least were in the Q&A have been answered. If there's something else in the chat we missed, let us know, please. I do see that there are a couple of hands up. I do think maybe we could, I want to make sure we don't go over time, and I do want to mention a couple of things. So I'd like to more formally close the session, let people go, and then if there are some additional questions, I'm happy to stay behind. I don't know if the LabXchange folks would have additional time, but I'm going to type in the chat where to go if you have additional questions and or questions that come up later. So for PhET, we encourage you to reach out to phetglobal@colorado.edu. That's how you would contact myself or Zach or another member of the team. And for LabXchange, where would you like people to go for any further questions? I thought I saw Andrew put something in the chat earlier, but I could be wrong. Okay, there we go. Jennifer's just shared her email address. Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, well, I think, is there anything else that on the LabXchange side you would like to say before we close?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have been frantically typing to try to respond. I just love all of the questions. I think a really big takeaway, is that both PhET and LabXchange working together really believe that every learner, no matter where you are across the globe, deserves equitable access to science education. And, in order to have that mission come to reality, come to real life, we just thrive and we live for the experiences and the expertise from our educator community. Any opportunities that we can have to collaborate with you, for you to share your success stories and implementation stories in the classroom, we're always looking to highlight those and to share those with the greater community. And again, we just really feel strongly that, personalized learning, self-directed learning is, what we are really talking about as we're thinking future forward, right? What will tomorrow's classrooms look like? And those classrooms will look like empowered learners, choosing when and how they access information and how they synergize with that information and how they learn so that they can have really productive, impactful educational experiences and hopefully just really satisfying and happy lives with career and whatever, great things await them in their future. So that's just really our big initiative. Thank you for taking the time today. Please, please, please reach out to us, inundate our inboxes, please. Questions, opportunities for training, just like PhET, we offer free training to anyone, personal demos, training to your administrators, training to your faculty about LabXchange, about science pedagogy, about really good lesson plan design, just like PhET. And again, thank you to PhET. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Zach. They are just an incredible team over there at PhET. If you ever get a chance to work with their team, please, please, I encourage you, jump on board. You will learn so much. And I promise you, you will continue to be that impactful educator that you are each and every day in your classroom.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you, Mary and Andrew, for your time. I know we've come to the close of the session right now. Like I said, we'll stick around. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, but hopefully you know where to reach out to us. And if you missed any of this, you will be receiving an email that's automated from Zoom, I think exactly 23 hours from now. And we'll make sure to include the recording, a link to the recording of the session. So again, thank you so much and have a wonderful day.